Welcome back to the Torque Test channel. As much competition as there is in brushless impact wrenches these days, there's precious few at the very top in torque. I'm talking the big dog 1-inch drive two-hander stuff that makes me see it and think, yeah, I'm gonna need that. I don't have any work that needs that, but I'm gonna need that ASAP. So far, until Makita XGT becomes available in the States or DeWalt finally drops the 60 volt they've been cooking, there's only two brands, Milwaukee M18 and Ingersoll Rand, with battery Pixie powered Gatling gun size cannons, and that's it. Everything else in this category is much cheaper and powered by air, but that requires many thousands of dollars in supporting air system to be keeping those fed. So often, oddly expensive tools like these on this end of the heavy duty tools are cheaper when you're running them these days, which brings us to this. A lot of our viewers have been sending us links to 1-inch drive cordless impact wrenches that have made their way onto sites like Alibaba, AliExpress, and from what we can tell, there's about 3 flavors at the moment. There's this hybrid of an M18 type handle and IR type saddlebag battery impact in the $550 to $650 range shipped. Then there's more expensive versions of pretty much the same thing, some small changes. And in looking for those, we saw this, a $1,000, $1,100 1-inch impact with a digital mode settings button interface on top that the others don't have. Billet aluminum handle, takes Makita batteries like most of them seem to, and it's the only one we saw doing actual work that these are used for often. Now, we've been burned a bit before buying a pistol style 1-inch drive sort of big boy Makita gun on AliExpress. This thing, and it was weak sauce. Big swing and a miss, time to stop cheaping out and go big or go home, we feel. This model was the most expensive, available from a couple sources, currently for as low as around $1,000 currently. Either type you buy, you end up getting this one though, a green 1-inch impact. That's pretty awesome, frankly. The gravity of it alone does some convincing about you needing to take it seriously. The latest version even has lights on each side to shine forward into your semi-truck wheel dish. Is pretty cool. And this was $1,000 bare, which means it's $150 to $200 more than a Milwaukee and just under the cost of an Ingersoll Rand. In many cases, you can find that IR for even less these days. For that, you get, depending on the seller's enthusiasm, 3,000 to 3,200 Newton meter tightening and 3,700 to 4,000 Newton meter breakaway. That's 2,300 foot-pounds to 2,950 foot-pounds, 3,000. Quite a gamble though. Anyone buying one of these off the site with similar price points and specs to known quality brands, I guess that's why we exist, to see for ourselves and bring you along for the ride. We're going to use the standard Makita packs to see how this thing does if you're buying it bare, as well as our own 2 best performing Makita type packs, our own Beans one that we made from Mollicell 21700 cells, and the eWork 3P pack, which we found to be also amazingly good in testing, spreading that load over 3 rows of cells. It does quite well. Our first go at things is usually working torque. We'll give it a 5-second go in reverse since we have a lot of forward coming up on this dyno before likely needing to step over to the, you wouldn't want to move it around, 800-pound Skidmore setup over here. IR also on screen with the M18 using a forge pack. So as it turns out, this Makita battery taking impact doesn't so much like Makita batteries, running into the same reasons Makita's own 1-inch is likely going to be 40 volt XGT, not their 18 volt LXT battery offering. Topping out in a 5 to 6 amp hour 2P pack doesn't provide a ton of headroom for discharge amps when feeding a hungry motor. The tool itself in this case is 18 volt or 21 volt if you read the AliExpress listing, but it just wakes things up at that voltage. The motor itself is 36/40 volt, requiring both packs in series to run it, and even then, what you saw was typical. Sometimes we could complete shorter runs without issue. Never were the numbers all that up there. Last thing we'd want to do is convince one of you guys this thing works flawlessly with your 18 volt Makita packs and drop 1K on one of these. So this is where we're leaving that. If you need the levels of torque this thing advertises, stock Makita packs probably won't take you there, but also not totally the seller's fault. They do offer 8 amp hour Makita packs, which we didn't buy because most of the time when we buy off that site, they're fake anyways. Instead, we're going to use our own packs we know to have lots of proven total watts capability. So you might see tests on this episode start at like 6 seconds and end at 1, or start at 11 seconds and end at 1, because the trigger and hammer relationship, which I'll talk about in a bit, is a bit funky, but it's still 5 and 10 seconds total. 933 foot-pounds. It's not amazing, but a lot of that based on additional testing on this Skidmore is trigger versus hammer timing and how they are clocked together. Sometimes the tool has a hitch in its giddy up before it gets going, which can make for sometimes easy, sometimes hard to gauge smaller trigger pulls when you're just asking for a smidge of progress. Pretty difficult, and also hard to time trigger pulls when you're impacting in a time test. The 933 here represents that difficulty, albeit it sometimes would do better. We do median results for this, and that's this one. All that to say, basically this thing's not done. She's got some steam. Let's see that in its 10-second test. $1,460 foot-pounds. Once she gets moving, she's really moving out, passing up the Milwaukee and the $1,100 some odd dollar IR here along the way. This thing is impressive. I'll say it, definitely the most impressive AliExpress purchase we've made, though it takes some dough to see that kind of result. It does hit like a freight train. Let's take a look inside of that freight train, which will explain some things. The larger a cordless impact is, I'm telling you, the easier it is to take it apart. It's really not all that scary. Everything is just less fiddly at this size. It uses some large shouldered bolts to hold the hammer housing on, which is nice. Inside you'll find a massive planetary ring and shielded bearing, probably the largest I've seen in anything cordless, and this is all a one-piece aluminum housing that's sandwiched between those bolts. It isn't like cast zinc alloy, it's pretty nice. Inside you'll see that big, but not huge, 36-volt motor, and up front is where the business happens. Huge hammer cover, massively deep steel bushing to support that extended anvil out front. It looks to spec there, it's good stuff. And then there's this behemoth of a hammer assembly.
She big.
And that spring, not tightly coiled at all, it's just massive, like in diameter. It's a chunk factor 10. This is noticeably larger and heavier than anything we've seen before in cordless. Even its planetary gears look large. I mean, just look at it. This weighs in at almost exactly 12 pounds. 12 pounds. This spinning at high speed hammer weighs as much as one of these. Like the whole thing with the battery attached. Our last AliExpress 1-inch purchase, yeah, the hammer in our new tool weighs as much as this guy. This is pretty cool and an easy from a manufacturing and physics standpoint to add some spice to your tool when designing it, but it comes with a short list of downsides. It's a lot of load on the tool and motor to just keep it impacting, meaning that motor is working overtime and standard batteries can't finish the job. Number two, you're doing no fine work with this tool. It's like doing surgery with a battering ram. We thought maybe the trigger was annoying, but it's that spring required to reset the mass at high speed and RPM. It has to bind up and release a lot of that tension just to get moving. And if the hammer has no runway, like to gain speed and momentum to start that whole resetting operation, like when the hammer's inside already butted up against the anvil, it takes a second for the motor to literally wind up the coil spring and start ugga-dugga-ing. And number three, the mass doesn't disappear once it's bolted inside. You feel it? I alluded to it earlier, but haven't put a number to it. This thing is heavy, all said. The IR with 2 batteries is 29 pounds. This is 33.5-ish pounds bare. Over 37 pounds with the batteries needed to run it. You notice that, let me tell you. But heck, I mean, part of me feels like we just got a bit extra with our order. When you're buying something because it looks the biggest and baddest, I suppose you can't be all that surprised when you get just that. I love when we crack open tools and get old school Cold War machinery vibes from it. Okay, enough modern marvels. Let's see what it can do in our 15-second best case scenario test. Battery's fresh off the charger, then we'll head over to do some reverse bolt breakaway action.
That's a wild ride.
1,812 foot-pounds. And yeah, you feel it. Once things are very difficult to move, that 37 pounds worth of tool wants to move you just as much as the bolt with each hit. It's like throwing a sledgehammer in a washing machine on spin cycle and fruitlessly trying to hold it steady with your bare hands. This is a new cordless record, though, of anything cordless, anything we've ever tested. credit where credit's due. This is going to likely be able to remove a lot of 33mm truck nuts and then some. Let's rank this thing, then we'll see how it does taking stuff off. Starting below the other dual battery 1-inch impact, the top cordless on sale today, its dyno runs are turned into points as 93, 147, and 182. As a function of its weight, the short anvil one that they sell for weight here, like we do with all these to keep it even, but with the batteries we needed to power it, that's 40.9 points as a function of torque and weight. That's not very good, and it weighs more than any cordless or air impact we've ever tested. It varies, but this was listed with 2,213 foot-pounds tightening torque. We saw as much as 82% of that in our testing. $1,000 ain't cheap. Hopefully these go down as they become more commonplace. We'll see, but as purchased, that's 27.5 points. It's not too bad. And that totals 572.4, placing it exactly where it is, sandwiched between these two, but second in cordless, not too shabby for AliExpress. But does it, can it really beat the IR in torque like these numbers imply? We have some standard levels of torque we test this class of impact in to remove for some bolt breakaway fun. In this case, 1,700 foot-pounds. Here's the Jolly Green Giant up against the Ingersoll Rand and M18 cordless from last time. The steeper the curve removing, the better. This thing is just fascinating from a design perspective. It follows the curve of the IR almost perfectly, but once things get down to the 800-ish foot-pound point, it just takes 3 hits of that massive hammer to remove that much. Whereas the IR, it takes a lot more, and the M18 comparatively takes all day. So should you buy it? Almost certainly not. It's heavy in a way you're gonna notice as you try to use this thing horizontally most of the time. 37 pounds plus sockets, which can range from a few pounds to a lot of pounds. That weight and the weight inside mostly causes it to be more violent than any other cordless or even air tool we've tested in this class. On tough stuff, there's a twisting action to this that you have to actively fight against in order for it to deliver those blows effectively. It's like you're in a punching match. There's no warranty to speak of on something that costs this much, so that's not great either. And it's forward reverse switch. I can see why they were putting it up here to be in a more convenient spot and sort of copying the M18, but Milwaukee made it difficult to bump or select accidentally. There's a lot of throw to that switch. And that happens frequently on this green guy. Based on where your hand grip is and how much it's moving around, it's not great. And not sure if it's because of that switching action, but sometimes if you switch it to forward, it will still run in reverse while selected in forward and vice versa. Like, it didn't adopt the change, and something this size and weight, you want some confidence in what it's about to do. We're curious now if any of the cheaper, lighter ones can pack as much a punch, but that does seem to be the price sweet spot at $500-600. We might judge this particular one a bit more favorably. But currently, consider yourself lucky. We could be the guinea pigs here at this price, which, hey, that just makes it more fun to watch sometimes, we think. Thanks for choosing to do that with us each Friday. We make these every week. I appreciate you joining us for this one.